Okay friends, one of the first things we need to do to get started is to remove our negative battery terminal. Set that away from the battery so it makes no contact with the battery itself. Now directly underneath your alternator, you're going to be able to find your serpentine belt tensioner. You can either use a 3/8 ratchet or a serpentine belt tool. Essentially come right inside this groove right here, turn it counterclockwise, and then we're going to remove the belt from the alternator. Let's go ahead and get our tool out of here and we'll continue. Go ahead and grab onto this, get in between, and then separate the clamp. That just gives us a little bit extra slack. If you need more, you can come over here to the EGR valve. Go ahead and lift up on this tab. We'll slide this off of here as well. Now we have all the room in the world. Now right on the back side of the alternator, you're going to be able to see where the power wire comes in. We're going to want to make sure we go ahead and pull that boot out of the way. Once it's out of the way, it exposes the mounting nut. Let's go ahead and remove that nut. Just going to use my 13mm wrench, get right back here. Let's go ahead and get the wire off of there. We'll set this aside. So the next thing we want to do is get the wiring off of the alternator right here. You're going to see that there's a little clip. If you were to come with a small pocket screwdriver along the back side, I'm just going to go ahead and grab onto the edge of that clip, draw it away, and then we'll remove the wiring harness from the back of the alternator. There we are. It's always a good idea to make sure that you inspect your wiring. If you see any funny colors, it's probably corrosion and it needs to be dealt with. This one looks good, so let's set it aside. Since we're in this area, let's continue on to removing this bolt on the top passenger side of the alternator. Now along the front, you're going to see that you have two more mounting bolts, one here and one right there. Let's remove those. Okay. Now we're going to use a pry bar. There's going to be two areas that we want to pry on potentially. Essentially right in between the alternator over here. Try to separate it from the bracket, and also on the other side between the alternator and the bracket. Go ahead and shove it in between there. Give it a nice little pry and separate the alternator from its bracket. There it is, friends. Now before we go ahead and mount in our new alternator, we want to pay attention to these two areas right here. Essentially, we're going to spray these down with some penetrant, and then we're going to hit them with a hammer from the back side towards the front. That's going to give us a nice space so we can slide in our brand new alternator. Okay friends, now it's time to install our brand new alternator. Let's go ahead and slide it down into its corresponding area here. Now I'm going to come from the back and I'm going to line up this first bolt. Start it in a few good threads, and then of course we'll put in the other two. Now we're going to bottom out these two anchor bolts right here, and then we'll torque them to 37 foot-pounds. Now it's going to be time to start plugging things back in. Let's start with this electrical harness from the back here. Let's go ahead and line it up with where it needs to go. Push it in and listen for a click. There it is. Give it a nice little tug. Perfect. Now the next thing we want to pay attention to is the mating surface on our power wire. Make sure that that's nice and clean. Use a little bit of sandpaper. Okay, now that we have it nice and cleaned up, let's go ahead and install it onto the alternator. I'm going to come right around the back side here. Start it onto the stud on the back side of the alternator, and then we're going to take our nut. We'll start it on there, snug it up. All right, now we're going to torque this to 12 foot-pounds. Perfect. Now that we got that torqued, make sure you put the cover back on there. That's going to help prevent it from arcing out or grounding out. All right, let's go ahead and bring this wire back over to our EGR valve, connect that in. Listen for a click, give it a nice tug. We're going to come back over here to our anchor point. Let's make sure that we get that back on there. Perfect. There we are. So now just take your time and thoroughly inspect. Make sure you're sitting inside all the grooves of all your pulleys, and of course the backing sitting where it needs to be. After that, go ahead and start up your engine, let it run for approximately 10 seconds, turn it back off, and then come back out here and re-inspect to make sure you're secure on all of your pulleys. Okay, now it's time to reconnect our negative battery terminal. Let's go ahead and start that on there, and then we'll snug it up. There we are. Double check to make sure it's secured. Perfect.